Hi everyone, my name is Travis Crum and I'm going to be talking to you today about Watson Health. I've entitled this presentation, "The Computer Will See You Now." So let's start with some background first. Watson is IBM's name for their cognitive computing and artificial intelligence system. It's essentially a computer that can think. So back in 2011, IBM wanted to test the computer's effectiveness in its regard to thinking. And specifically, they created the Jeopardy IBM Challenge. As part of that, they had the computer, you can see the computer there in the middle of the screen, compete on the game show against Jeopardy's champions, Brad Rutter, you can see him there on the right, and Ken Jennings, there second to the left on the screen. This was the first time that a computer had competed on a game show. And what happened? Well, ultimately, Watson was right a lot of the time. He ended up winning the game. Specifically, his winnings were $77,000, leaving Rutter and Jennings in the dust with $21,600 and $24,000 respectively. It turned out that the real Jeopardy winning machine was, well, a machine. So how does IBM Watson work, and how does that make Watson different than previous IBM computer systems? Well, previous computer systems are based on logical searches. Think of a traditional search that you maybe would enter into a search engine. You input specific keywords, and the computer or search engine returns a list of potential results, sorted by relevance, based off the keywords that you input. If you input a bad keyword, you end up with a bad search. Watson is a little different. Watson is based on a question and answer search methodology. Humans pose questions to Watson in natural language. Watson then analyzes potential answers and then comes back with a precise answer based off of a very detailed decision-making process, and then returns a confidence level. So why is that such a big deal? Well, this is based off of natural language processing, which is a little different than previous computer systems. Consider the sentence that's in the middle of the screen there in blue. As you read that sentence, each one of you has a picture that's popped into mind. You've created that picture based on your ability to evaluate the context of the sentence and the associated probability of each scenario that the sentence could indicate. That's somewhat formed by past experience. When a computer looks at this sentence, they could come back with a variety of different interpretations. I've borrowed some pictures here from IBM's Think Academy. The first scenario, the computer can come back and think that you're referring to a housefly that is over top of a boat and has a red bow. You can see his little violin and red bow there in hand. A second possible scenario might mean that the boat itself possesses a red bow and arrow. And the third scenario, which is likely the most probable scenario, is that there's a plane flying over a boat with a red bow, meaning the front of the ship. And you've used various contexts and past experience with these types of words to interpret a possible scenario. The problem with this is that human language by its nature is ambiguous, and your ability to evaluate it contextually and based off of history is something that a computer could not do up until now. So how did Watson get so smart? Well, Watson's creators at IBM fed an incredible amount of information into Watson. They started with things like the encyclopedia, thesaurus, dictionary, so that Watson could interpret word meanings and subtleties in word use. They fed news information into Watson so that Watson would be aware of current events. They included literature. Lots of classic literature got fed into Watson. And that was so that Watson could develop insight based off of both human behavior as well as context. And they've also forced a lot of information around research papers and other information into Watson. We'll cover a little bit of that specifically here in healthcare in just a moment. So as IBM considered their Jeopardy winnings, and industries to which they could apply their cognitive and advanced AI capabilities, healthcare stuck out as an opportunity for the three reasons listed on this slide. We'll cover each of these in more detail on the next three slides. So the first one, an overall complexity and amount of health data. A healthy person is estimated to generate approximately 80 megabytes of data each year just in imaging and data within the electronic medical record. A one-week hospital stay can generate hundreds of pages of data within an electronic medical record. And according to a 2012 Poneman study, nearly 30% of all data that's stored in the cloud is health-related. And with the push to EMRs in the last 5 years, healthcare data is likely even a higher percentage of the cloud storage today. IBM estimates that by the year 2030, that medical data will represent over 2,310 exabytes of data. So that's larger than a terabyte or a petabyte. The EMR is not the only source of health data, however. If you think about wearable and implantable medical devices such as pacemakers, pacemakers generate a ton of information, allowing patients and medical professionals to interact in whole new ways. And that does not take into consideration fitness devices such as the Fitbit or Garmin that track the number of steps that you take, your heart rate, your weight, and how that information trends over time. Most of this data is largely unstructured and provides a huge opportunity going forward for us to be able to leverage data analytics and cognitive computing abilities. The second item is rapid research, clinical trials, and changes in standards of care. Based on a speech by the chief medical officer for IBM, there are nearly 8,000 oncology research papers published each and every day. This is an incredible amount of research, and it's continually changing. There are literally thousands of clinical trials that are ongoing throughout the country, most of which are specific to a specific condition or a single drug. And this oftentimes leads to physicians and other medical professionals operating off of information that may be 18 to 24 months out of date. It makes keeping current nearly impossible, specifically on the most advanced treatment options. Rising healthcare costs was the third item that was highlighted. U.S. healthcare spending is expected to reach over $11,000 per person in 2018. And in 2017, healthcare spending represented 18% of our gross domestic product, or $3.5 trillion. Healthcare grew by 5% from 16 to 17 and was actually the single largest growing segment of our gross domestic product as a country. And it's expected that global spending on healthcare for chronic conditions will reach $47 trillion by 2030. So certainly a large opportunity as it relates to helping us be more efficient and more effective as to how we treat healthcare. So how does Watson help in healthcare? Well, specifically, Watson has been leveraged within two fields within healthcare, and that's specifically within oncology, cancer treatment, and genomics, so the mapping of the human genome, and specifically how that interacts with other medical conditions. Watson takes in medical information that includes inputs and key diagnostics, such as your blood pressure, weight, any pre-existing conditions, as well as free text information using that natural language processing that we talked about earlier to provide a full profile of each patient. Watson then goes and researches information, including 25 million research papers on oncology alone, that was used to build up his medical knowledge. He uses the profile, identifies the current condition, and as a result of that, goes and finds relevant medical research and standards of care for each patient. Watson then taps into a database of clinical trial information that's currently ongoing around the country. and determines which of those may align with a patient's particular care plan. Based off of that information, Watson then provides suggested treatment to the physician and provides an overall confidence level. So it sounds pretty phenomenal, right? Well, a couple things. There's an ethical issue that gets presented here. While no medical professional would want any patient to ever be harmed, what happens if a patient is inadvertently harmed as a result of a recommendation from Watson? Who is ultimately responsible? Is the computer responsible? The manufacturer of the computer? The content stewards? The content creators? The doctor or other healthcare professional? Or is the hospital ultimately responsible? Additionally, in current events, IBM, while they have spent a lot of money on Watson and 6 years of research, Watson's future looks relatively gloomy. If you've followed any recent headlines, you would note that there have been significant layoffs in the summer of 2018 at IBM related to Watson. Specifically, there are two primary issues related to this. The first is a challenge for IBM getting access to the electronic medical record. Specifically within the US, there are primarily 2 electronic medical record providers, and IBM has had challenges given proprietary concerns of those firms of getting access to the electronic medical record. The second is many healthcare clients have actually dropped their Watson subscriptions due to Watson being inaccurate in some cases, being tripped up by a lack of data and rare or recurring cancers, or the fact that the treatments that are fed into Watson weren't up to date or weren't as up to date as they could have been. So some discussion questions. The first, do you think IBM was too aspirational in their goal of changing healthcare? Why or why not? Should the government provide additional funding or remove barriers to further develop cognitive or artificial intelligence capabilities in healthcare? And third, how would you feel about medical treatment suggested by a computer? Do you think medical professionals will ever be replaced? I want to thank you all for listening to my presentation, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.